Footage has emerged proving WNBA referees definitely have an agenda against Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever.
Recently released video shows the WNBA referees are utterly disregarding the Indiana Fever and Caitlin Clark in the most demeaning manner imaginable. So compelling is the video evidence that even these referees are being requested by casual fans. Must be dismissed right away. This isn't just. This is straight, and the officiating is no longer poor. Corruption captured on film, and the league cannot avoid it. What is the most obvious instance of sports referee bias that you have seen?
Some controversy on that last play, no doubt about it. In my opinion, it looked like Natasha Cloud probably fouled her. It was not called. The referees love to swallow their...
Look, I've been hiding. After playing basketball for years, I believed I'd observed everything. But what transpired during that Liberty versus Fever game wasn't simply inadequate officiating. It was a masterclass on destroying the credibility of professional athletics while the entire globe observes.
You've seen the last play from Caitlin, and then on top of that, what do you think of your team's late game execution?
I thought she got fouled. I think it's pretty egregious what's been happening to us the last few games. A minus 31 free throw discrepancy. And I might be able to understand it if we were just chucking threes, but we're not. We're attacking the rim. And the disrespect right now for our team has been pretty unbelievable. So it's disappointing, that
Film that came to light demonstrates something so ridiculous that it raises questions. If these referees ought to even be permitted close to a basketball court, only referee professional matches. We're referring to 3 adult guys wearing stripes, shirts that are essentially ignoring Kelsey Mitchell, Caitlin Clark, and the whole Fever bench as they attempt to draw their focus to the apparent missed calls prior to discussing smoking gun evidence. Let's discuss what caused As of right now, the Fever entered that game, being aware that they had to cope with more than only the defense of the Liberty. They have to get past what's turning into an officiating style that appears to be intended to maintain Clark and her group from achieving.
The refs messed up 3 calls in the last 3 possessions of this game. First, DeWanna Bonner gets absolutely destroyed, no call. And then Sabrina Ionescu makes the contact. And this is the worst one. There's 1 foul. There's 2 fouls. Then she holds her, watch this, with her shoulder and on her arm.
The figures. Truthful, and they're definitely. A minus 31 free throws is astonishing. Not only is disparity unlucky, but it's impossibility of statistics when you're assaulting the rim with the same ferocity as that evening. Even Stephanie had a fever. White, who is typically tactful regarding these items, were unable to conceal her frustration no longer.
Talked about the way that the game has been officiated for you guys. How did you see the foul that was not called, or a lack of foul, on the Bonner play, and then follow it up by Lexi Hull getting called for the foul?
I thought it was egregious, honestly. I thought it was obvious. I felt like AB got one, had one going to the rim. They're in rotation. DB's was crazy. We had, and then Lexi's, I felt like equally, we talk about, coming into the path, and it was an offensive player veering into the defensive player's path.
White's remarks following the game were, she didn't merely bring up the free throw disparity, she referred to it as outrageous and expressed the disdain for their group has been just amazing. When a qualified coach begins utilizing such phrases, let you realize that things have beyond the typical EB and flow of officiating errors. What causes them? This entire issue is much more frustrating. Throughout the entire off-season, the WNBA, promising improved officiating, brought in evaluation programs and spoke regarding responsibility and created a big declarations regarding raising the caliber Kathy Angelbert herself made the calls. Obvious that referees would be held accountable for greater expectations this season, so what are those higher criteria exactly? Given that what we saw wasn't merely poor performance, it was officiating, so prejudice that my nephew, who is 4 years old, might identify the issues from the other side of the room, and I assure you that he is more intrigued. More often in cartoons than in basketball. The most incriminating piece of information arrived in the form of footage captured by a fan, caught at a pivotal point in the game as the players of the Fever were frantically attempting to get in touch with the referees regarding all missed calls. 3 representatives made a conscious choice to ignore and turn away from them entirely, not a single one, not 2. Each of the 3 referees concurrently determined that Caitlin, Lexi Hall, and Clark Sophie Cunningham weren't worth acknowledging. That's not unintentional, that's not a brief error. That's a concerted effort in judgment to show disdain for professional athletes who were only attempting to comprehend why it was clear that fouls weren't being called. It is a startling sight to behold. Figure 3. 3 paid professional referees to preserve the game's integrity. Players are being literally ignored. People are making an effort to be respectful. Talking about calls as the type of the conduct that one might anticipate from middle referees at the school are having a rough day. From representatives of the Premier's women's basketball league in the world. But the contempt didn't stop there. During the game, we witnessed example after instance of contact that would typically result in foul calls being completely overlooked when it involved Fever players, reaching infractions that were so blatant that replay showed hands definitely grabbing jerseys and arms, while uncalled physical touch in the paint that would transmit additional players to the free throw line was handled as though it were a typical basketball game when it. Clark and her teammates experienced the final example was the most outrageous of the match at a pivotal play. Clark has 1 second remaining on the clock, was attempting to be open to a possible winning shot in the game. The video captures her being seized, restrained, and hindered in various ways. It would lead to egregious infractions in any game that is fairly officiated, but instead the referees put their whistles away and allow New York to win and get away with it. Wasn't compensated. What makes this especially that these same referees are aggravating. Calling ticky-tack fouls on was easy. Touch fouls at the other end of the court that were hardly noticeable as contact were sending Liberty players to the free throw line while Fever players were being robbed without making any calls. The discrepancy wasn't only apparent, was deliberate, according to the statistical data. Backs up what our eyes were telling us. The Fever made less attempts at free throws, more than they ought to have given their play style and the interaction they. In the meanwhile, their rivals were reaching the bottom of plays that wouldn't typically lead to fouls. Math is incomprehensible unless you take into account prejudice. This isn't the first time we've noticed this pattern either. Throughout the second season of Clark's professional career, there has been an unsettling pattern of officiating that looks meant to eliminate her influence on games, whether defenders are able to play more as a result. Personal contact with her than is permitted. To ignore or play with other celebrities. Apparent fouls when she's the victim. It's getting harder to ignore the trend. What aggravates me the most is that this is hurting more than just Clark. The entire WNBA, the league, is experiencing a record-breaking increase in fan interaction and viewership, mostly due to Clark's attendance, and she adds excitement to games when referees make an effort to lessen that excitement by unfair officiating. They're destroying the stuff that's introducing women's basketball to new audiences. Consider it from a business perspective. Viewpoint: the WNBA has never experienced more. Watching their games on TV are at an all-time high, and attendance is rising, and sales of items are declining. Records: all of this expansion is taking place although one of their most well-known figures is being deliberately targeted by officiating that is anything from inept to the league's reaction to malevolent. These issues have not been sufficiently addressed at best rather than dealing with the obvious bias patterns. They've published generic declarations regarding the evidence for their officials and upholding the integrity of the game. However, how can you keep honesty when your officials are apprehended, literally turning their backs on camera on athletes? Other coaches in the league has begun to take notice as well. They may not communicate as bluntly as Stephanie White did, and there have been delicate remarks and perceptive glances when inquired about the uniformity of officiating. The coaching community is aware of what's occurring, even though they aren't always ready to express it in public. The players have used social media much more directly. Remarks and posts following the creation of games. They are obviously conscious of the bias and irritated by their failure to obtain equitable treatment by authorities when professional athletes begin to wonder the officiating official's integrity. You are aware in public that the situation has reached a moment of rupture. What's so striking is that these referees appear to think they're untouchable. The footage of them disregarding the players for the fever exhibit a degree of disdain and haughtiness that implies they think there won't be any repercussions for their behavior. They're most likely correct, which makes the entire scenario even more frustrating. The WNBA has invested too much on creating their brand to allow a few prejudiced referees ruin the work they've done. The league must take decisive action, not only to safeguard Clark and the Fever, however, in order to preserve the quality of the whole contest. When spectators begin wondering if games are being determined by referees instead of athletes, the most crucial thing is that you've lost it. The answer to sports credibility isn't complex. The league must admit the existence of the issue, examine the particular instances that have been recorded, and take suitable measures against authorities who have shown bias. They must put in place improved training initiatives, strengthen accountability measures, and make it is evident that this conduct won't be tolerated. More crucially, they must do it fast. For each game that goes by, more harm is done when biased officiating is used, undermines the standing of the league, and alienates more admirers who are watching. Their sport-related investments are hampered by dishonest or inept authorities. Fans have observed that the players have observed the coaches have observed the only those who appear to be unaware of the league officials are the issue, possess the ability to correct it. The query is whether they'll act before the damage becomes permanent. This isn't about safeguarding a single player or team. It's about preserving the authenticity of professional basketball for women at a period when it's experiencing tremendous growth and opportunity. The WNBA cannot afford to allow prejudice to officiating halts the progress they've worked so hard to build. But let's return to what truly transpired during that game, because of the even worse details, more than what the headlines indicate. When you dissect the particular plays, and bias gets so apparent that it's nearly, if it weren't so harmful, it would almost be humorous. To our beloved sport, the first quarter established the tone right away. Clark drove 3 different times to the basket and took in contact that would transmit most players to reach the line for free throws. Instead, she got nothing. Meanwhile, on the Liberty, athletes were receiving other end requests for communication that were hardly observable. The difference was very clear, that even the pundits began to asking the referee questions, and they generally refrain from critiquing referees during live broadcasting. The second more of the same came this quarter, although adding a twist. The referees began calling flagrant and technical fouls. Fever players receive fouls for actions that would typically lead to nothing more, rather than an alert. When Clark displayed any, she was upset over missed calls, targeted for technicals right away. but when Liberty players followed suit, the referees suddenly developed selective hearing and vision by halftime. The design was so obvious that even the arena's casual spectators were jeering. The officiating. The disparity in free throws was already getting close to absurd levels, and that wasn't even halfway through the game. Stephanie White attempted to resolve it during the break with the officials, but her worries were disregarded by the type of conceit that implies these referees think they're superior.